Awesome. Welcome to EMO Lacrosse, where we talk everything field lacrosse. Got a very, very special video for everybody today and everybody who's really interested in the international growth of a game that we all love. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Kinori Sugihara Rosnow.
Yes. Hi. Nice to see you,
Awesome.
man.
So Kinori and I, for context, I worked for the World Games and World Championships in Birmingham, and I wish I had my chopsticks that y'all gave me when
Yeah.
when I got to meet all of y'all. I got to take pictures and stuff, but Team Japan was absolutely incredible. Kinori, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience playing lacrosse with Team Japan in Birmingham and seeing some of the guys who were playing just recently in San Diego, and just kind of a little bit about Japan lacrosse in your play.
Oh man, that's a real wide open a subject there. I think that it's really cool to be able to play lacrosse with you know I don't speak Japanese a lot in the United States when I'm here just because a lot of my friends here don't speak Japanese. But it's cool I'm always struck by how you hear lacrosse in different languages when you go to these international events. That's like the first thing that always kind of hits me because as soon as you walk in, like if you play Team Germany or anything like that, you can hear them speaking in German. And so that's something that's always special. So just kind of switching contexts and playing the same game that, it bridges all these countries, but we still also have our own cultures in there. That's what's really something that like strikes me every time I go and play an event like this. And you asked about, lacrosse in Japan, and what it's like to play with those guys. It's very special. It's very different. I think that a lot of the other, especially within like the top 10 countries, most of the teams, they speak English. Everybody can speak English. But in Japan, with our Team Japan guys, a lot of us, only a handful can actually speak English. And in the sixes team and the 2018 team, I was the only one who actually went to college in the United States for the entirety of my 4 years and like had grown up in the United States. Everybody else had grown up in Japan, had gone through that schooling system, and at most had done some study abroad. So it's a completely different feel. The play is even a little different stylistically, and also there's like a cultural aspect as well as a linguistic aspect. It's very I don't know. It brings some level of like extreme diversity, I think, to the sport. So, yeah.
That's really cool. You touched up on a couple things there that I kind of grasped onto. What would you say is the difference between the Japanese style and play and maybe like American and Canadian, something that most people would be familiar with?
Yeah, so the first thing that I like to talk about is kind of how the style comes about. In Japan, things are very detail oriented, a lot of speed, and so that's where the style kind of like derives from. And in addition, over there, like when they watch games, first of all, they don't get as many games broadcasted if there's any region locked broadcasting. So they're going to only get things that they can access, like such as YouTube and stuff like that. And so, a lot of those videos end up being highlight videos, right? So you end up getting these really high skill players that look at like individual skills as the main thing to develop, and they get really good at these things. And so there's also a level of specialization that happens where some players, they really identify strongly with a certain style of play, and so they'll end up specializing in not just playing in a certain position, but also like within that position, a style of play, and they get very, very good at it. And so what you end up having are these teammates that can do things that are I I don't know. It's funny because you would assume that they would like when you meet a certain player who's only played for so many years, you'd assume them to be able to do only certain things. But in Japan, the growth curve and the development's completely different. So I might be going off the rails here a little bit with that, but that's because most players start in college in Japan, you might not expect a lot of those players who'd only been playing for 4 or 5 years to be able to like throw behind the backs and stuff, but a lot of them can, and that's just like part of what's different. It's like the growth curve is different, the skills that they get is a little different, like the distribution of skills they get within their position is different. So, yeah.
So to me, that's incredible. And I don't think most people may not understand that in Japan, a majority of these players aren't playing or picking up a stick, maybe not even knowing about lacrosse until they get to the collegiate level.
Yeah. Yeah. I cannot stress that enough. I cannot stress enough that there are players on the national team, almost probably a majority of them, who had never played until their freshman year of college. And I try to explain this to people. Other people in the United States say, "Yeah, we started late too." And I said, "Yeah, but if you started late, you're an anomaly here. Over there, that is normal. Almost the entire population, the earliest that people in Japan usually will start is in high school, right? And there's only 2 high school programs in the entire country or something like that. So, but this is actually a topic for what the landscape is like now. That's a little different. This is within the last few years, this has changed. But before, so the current national team members, the earliest those guys have played is like freshman year of high school. So I thought I started late because I started, I picked up my first stick in like 6th grade, but I was on the West Coast, so we didn't really have coaching. A lot of the coaches that are there now weren't there when I was there. So when I was in 6th grade, we didn't quite have as much coaching. I wasn't really taught how to pass and catch until I hit like midway through high school. And so I thought I had started late, and then I met all my friends in Japan. I was like, wow, maybe it's just like in the blood to start late and just figure it out kind of deal.
That to me is so interesting. So is lacrosse growing now at the high school level in Japan, where like just in the past like 4 or 5, maybe even 10 years?
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting conversation. So it's not really growing at the high school level as much. So it's interesting. So lacrosse in Japan, I'm sure you might have heard from various broadcasts of World Lacrosse, as well as other people talking about it. But lacrosse has been around in Japan for roughly 30 years. And that amount of time is very interesting because that's roughly 2 generations that have come through lacrosse, right? So what happens when you have 2 generations is now you have a generation that is just kind of retiring from the sport and entering that coaching age that it was taught by a previous generation that had experience in the sport. And so now we kind of have like compounding experience, right? Which is where that high level coaching comes in. That's where the higher IQ starts to really shine. That's where skills start to get passed down at an earlier age. And so those people who've just kind of like moved on to that next generation as coaches, they have kids now, and their kids are starting to play. So it's actually and so from what I'm noticing, I mean, there might be more high school programs than I know of now, but it's starting to bubble up a little bit in youth where you have like these little pockets in different areas that are starting to play together. And that's, I just can't wait till that generation hits, playing like senior international play, because that's just going to be a whole new experience. I saw a middle schooler playing with high schoolers over there, and I couldn't believe he was in middle school. And I coach middle schoolers in the US too, and I was like, the whole next generation of lacrosse period is going to be amazing, right? But I was just very excited for Japan in general with those players. So yeah,
that is really, really interesting. I saw the PLL video where they went over and they were running some clinics with, it looked like there were a couple youth players in their high school around that age, but a lot of college guys too. And I see on Instagram you can find a lot of the universities and teams that are playing lacrosse. It's really, really cool. And I think it's remarkable that in just, you said 2 generations, this is how far Japan lacrosse has gotten. Like, it seems like there's a huge commitment that I'm not saying other countries don't have, but there's definitely a difference between Japan and some of these other countries. Like, there's a reason why the Japanese team won bronze in the World Sixes Championships, which you were a part of. And then there's also a reason why they moved up to Pool A, which is really fantastic. And I can't wait to watch how they play in Pool A. It's just really cool. It's cool.
definitely agree.
Touching up, so you said a lot of the players watch a lot of the highlights and they learn a lot, like very, very unique skill sets, and try to hone their skills. Can you touch up more on that and maybe talk about, like, do you think that there's pros and cons to that compared to like creative? Like, maybe that's like the total opposite from, like, I know I got the Haudenosaunee up here, Canadian game, where it's very creative, kind of do what you want. So would you say like y'all's offenses and defense, it's very like premeditated, we're going to do this, or is it more just like the style of the game with the player individually?
Yeah, so that actually differs depending on your level of play in Japan. So when the students are learning, they just try to, they just try to get everything they can get access to. Once you start getting into the higher level men's play, or like, women's, adult play, and especially into the national teams, you actually get really formalized and intense coaching. But if you're not within that pipeline yet and you're just starting out, a lot of them, they'll learn, what we know, which is usually fundamentals, and or a shot that they see in the highlights. So time and room, overhand, things like that. And so they get really good at these very specific skills, and that's why you see when the play happens. I've heard people say it's really disciplined. It's there's it's not like there's crazy things happening. It's just very well executed, and that's, I think, where that stems from. And then once they rise up and they get into those higher levels of play where they can actually get a different level of coaching, then you start to see more intricate, like, X's and O's start to come out of it. But when they start out, it's like, at least this is what it seems like, and just to reiterate, I grew up in the US. So a lot of this learning, I didn't have to do it this way. And so that's why, like, I have so much more respect for my teammates that come from over there, because it's like, I had some amount of coaching. Even though I had coaching late, I still had coaching at some point in many aspects, and that they did not have. And so that's why I'm always like, when people are like, Japan's amazing, I'm like, yeah, those guys are amazing. I do not feel like I get to own the same amount of credit that these guys do, because I had, access to some different stuff. When you talk about, say, like, Canada Haudenosaunee having like that creative side, and that like a very different style of play, I think that also comes from the fact that, like, there are so many, like, there's a profession, USA and Canada and the Haudenosaunee, they all have players in professional, leagues. And so when they go home, or they go and like coach youth, for example, like, that youth gets to see all these different ways of using a stick, right? Like, if you don't grow up seeing someone doing a one-handed something cool, spinning the stick, whatever, you might not even fathom that is something that is possible. Does that make sense? And so when you say that, like, oh, like, Japan doesn't play, they might play a little more disciplined, very fundamental. I think that it's not that they can't or won't. It's that a lot of the players from a young age were not exposed to those skills, but now that they're getting that exposure, I think that there's going to be this blossoming of difference you're going to see in the play. I think it's going to, and the reason why I say blossoming is I think it's literally going to spread out, and you're going to see a lot more strategies, a lot more skills that are going to be used. This is just me speculating. But this is also something that you see when you look at, like, Midwest lacrosse, or early West Coast lacrosse. Oh, I think we're breaking up a little bit here. Oh, okay, yeah. You're back. No, yeah. All I was saying was that even in the United States, when you have players that don't have exposure to this high level play, they don't really go out and think necessarily that these are things that are options to them. All the coaches are telling them, pass it this way, do it this way, and so they might think that is the only way. So, but I think that's changing now, so that's exciting.
Yeah, well, I think that your perspective is very unique in that, like you mentioned, you're one of the only players who spoke English or maybe grew up in America that played for Japan. You could kind of bring that back and, like, bring that experience back, like, noticing the differences between the games. So I personally think that's really, really cool. And when I watch the Japanese team play, a lot of things that you mentioned, like not many turnovers, very disciplined, but the shooting is next level. Like, the shooting is up there. They have shooters who I personally think could play in the PLL. Like,
that's another thing I cannot stress too much, like, or I not like cannot stress enough, is that, like, that there are very good players in Japan, and I actually don't think it's just shooters, because I think that, like, also they have a lot of great goalies, a lot of great other positions, because once you start getting good at specific skills, you start getting really good at the counter skills, right? The opposing skills. So, like, we also have really good goalies. We have, a lot of speed, so we have really good defense because our offensive players are fast. Like, that, I don't know how to how to say this in any other way other than like I think that there are professional level players in Japan. Like they could play with anyone if you just let them get used to the style of play difference. Because Japan's an island, the only people that go and play outside of Japan are the people who play in international play, right? But if you give those players the opportunity to like practice a little bit with other teams and just figure it out, they will figure it out. They're smart, they're hardworking, detail oriented, coachable. You know what I mean? Like I don't know what else you want out of a player that needs to pick up a different style. It's just I really think that there's a number of them, and I think that within sports marketing, it's really common to sensationalize and really aim at like this specific player, like one player, right, or two players or three. But I really think that there's actually a whole cohort in Japan that could actually be successful. So yeah, the shooting in particular has been highlighted lately just because I think the world is seeing it for the first time, like really noticing. It's been there for a little bit, but now it's like really starting to show. Like it's awesome to see. And I remember when when I was talking to some of the guys at the Sixes, I remember seeing some of their shots and they would come off the field and I told them, I was like, I played in the US, Canada, all over. You can score on anybody. Like I was telling all of them, like you can score on anybody. Keep shooting with confidence. You guys can score on any of these teams. And they I don't know. I like to like keep it positive and keep it exciting. So
that was the first me, Birmingham, Alabama, lacrosse in the South. I did not, when I worked for the World Games and I saw Japan take the field for the first time in sixes. Now we didn't get to see the pulls or all the positions, but I saw the shooting firsthand and I was mesmerized. I could not believe the velocity and the pinpoint accuracy, like by far one of the most accurate teams combined with speed. It was fantastic to watch. It was really cool. You go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say like the outside shooting. It's funny because that actually is one of I think the more recent things. So like lacrosse back in when I was there in 2018, in 2017, there was a lot of inside finishing. It was very basketball layup style, and now you're seeing like the 3-point shooter sort of style coming out, and that was like it was like this switch in changing hands of generations. So like the field team that you saw this time, like I was one of the people that wasn't on it. There was like only a few guys from the last field team that was on this field team. It was only a handful. There's like been a changing of hands that happened for this team, and that's one of the things that I think this younger group brought in was that outside shooting, which is it's so much fun to watch. I love it. I'm so excited. I love those guys. Yeah. I know specifically people are probably going to talk about like certain players, and it's just like I remember just going to shooting practice with those players and just been like, oh my gosh, like these guys are great. And then you should see the goalies that can stop those shots.
Yeah, who was the goalie in the World Games in Birmingham? Was that the same goalie or was that a different goalie?
There were two goalies. So there's only one of them actually went to the World Championships this year. The other one actually, I think there was a new one that came in for the roster this year.
Okay, which I play goalie and I coach and train goalies.
I think it was Yuki and Soya, so Tokumasu and Fukushima were the ones from Sixes last year, and then this year's Oshima and Tokumasu. So those are the two that were this time. Yeah.
Okay.
And man, they incredible. Quick hands.
Yeah, that's one thing that I noticed because I got to help y'all in the warm-ups. Like I would shag balls, get y'all waters, things like that. Yeah. And I watched the Japanese goalies, and those were some of the quickest hands of any goalies, including the Americans and Canadians in the entire World Sixes in Birmingham, which was Canada, Haudenosaunee, America, Japan, Australia, and was it England or Okay, yeah. So like really crazy quick hands. And you could tell like very disciplined, like not really like dropping the stick and chasing. They were like waiting for the ball, and just the hands were just lightning quick.
Yeah. And they're not necessarily like trying to read your body. They just follow the ball and they can get there. And that kind of blew my mind. I had to, I keep like talking to, some of the better shooters that I know in the US, and they're like, we'll invite goalies out and we'll go take shots. And, they'll be like, oh, this goalie plays here and they do this well and blah, blah, blah. And I can score on them pretty well. So I'm feeling pretty good about my shot. I was like, I just need you to come to Japan. Just let me show you. I just need you to come to Japan and try to shoot on one of those goalies and see when the same shots don't go in. It's just funny. I have friends who are like, oh, I think this shot's something I can bring out in the game. I was like, yeah, here. But if you come to Japan, I don't think you can shoot that shot. It's just completely different assumption in terms of range and like how quickly a goalie can get from pipe to pipe. I don't know. I saw goalies over there that were there were some guys, there's some goalies out there in the world that you're like, I don't know how to score on this guy, right? And many of them that I've met are in Japan. Like I've gotten the opportunity to play with some really high level goalies in Canada and the US, and there are players like that, I think, over in Japan. So
do you know some of like the training that they do to train their hand speed, or some, maybe they're like different philosophies?
Yeah, for goalies, I'm actually not sure all of the drills they do. In fact, I think that there's like they really want more drills, because every time I go over there, goalies ask me, I at least have one or two teams that'll be like, do you have any goalie drills for us? Because, this is all we have, I think we just see a ton of shots.
Really?
I'm not sure if it's just volume or what, but like they're like in the in some practices over here in the US, I see people, where they're like, oh, we'll have to like take shots with the goalie only a certain way because we're not going to put defense in. So like you have to be outside of this range, or we're not going to go this hard, whatever. In Japan, it's like green light, shoot on the goalie, 2 lines, go. And the goalie just stands there, and then they do it for like 2 hours.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was working at the World Championships. I posted like a video to Snapchat or Instagram or something, and I was like, the Japanese goalies are warming up on like 100-mile-per-hour plus shots. Like
Yeah.
in America, it's like you get a couple passes in, you get your feet warm. That's how I warm up my goalies. But now I'm reconsidering. Except maybe don't tell my goalies that, because they probably would like to hear that. But they were.
Yeah, no, I've actually heard that from another goalie who here who I shoot on. He said that he actually stopped warming up the slow shots because the timing changed. So like when you warm up the slow shots, you don't get used to the timings of like release, the ball coming at you. So maybe there's something to it. But goalies in Japan are just like getting that, and you can just start shooting, and they won't complain if you get too close. Like
Really?
they're just like, they'll be like, I don't know why you're doing that. Like you're never gonna get a shot like that here, but I'm gonna save it, and they will. Is the craziest thing.
So they're next level crazy goalies.
I mean, maybe just like they don't worry about it so much. They just move their hands fast, and they're gonna get there. And I think it's actually a mindset difference. If there's something they don't save, rather than saying, oh, you're too close, they say, what could I do to save it? Right? When you're growing up and you don't have a ton of information from people, you're always trying to find that way of improving yourself. So the questions go from where can I get this information to how can I find ways to be better, right? And so when something doesn't work, it's not always external where you're like, oh, I need to find a way to do this, like from somebody else. It's often, how do I fix that mistake that I just made? Because no one else will fix it for me. And I think that's like a kind of a big part of it. So like with those college teams, we're talking about, the college teams start, those players starting their freshman year of college. Many teams don't have coaches.
Really?
They're run by their own captains and their seniors. The practice planning is done by their own captains and their seniors. So where is the information coming from? It's coming from themselves. So the mindset of like, how do we fix this is completely different. And actually, I was invited to go help the under 21 team for a training camp. And when I went there, they would huddle after drills, and I wanted to speak. Like I was like, hey, I'm here to help you guys out. I'm here to give you information. But the head coach actually told me, hey, hold off for a second. They need to figure some stuff out on their own. And I thought that was a really cool difference, right? Here in the US, as soon as there's a huddle, coach starts talking sometimes. Yeah, okay, sometimes you have older players or more experienced players talk as well, but like they had a set aside time for these guys to problem solve. And that was really special. That was really special.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't see that on many teams. A lot of times it's a coach goes into the huddle and he's yelling about something or
Yeah.
complaining about something. It's
Yeah.
less of the players coming together. That's really interesting. That's really cool. I also one cool thing before we wrap this up that I definitely wanted to talk about. I think it's cool that y'all have y'all's own lacrosse sportswear brand in
Yeah,
Japan.
Vassallo.
That's super cool. Can you talk about some of their products? Like, because I don't know any other Americans or anybody in America who's
Yeah.
been able to play with their stuff. So what's it like?
Yeah, okay. So that's the guy who runs it's a buddy of mine. His name is Ken, Ken Ikegawa, and he's awesome, and he has a few people that help him out with it. But I'd say, like, first of all, they make apparel, and I love their apparel. Every time I go over there, I'm like, can I just get some shirts and stuff, because the stuff lasts way longer. It's funny because when you get like lacrosse based equipment, sometimes from smaller companies, they're trying to do it and like survive, so they might make something that's a little lower cost. But over there, they just make, I don't know, the shirts are quality. I like really like it. So
You got one on right now.
yeah, this one is as well. Or this side, yeah. Yeah, and the other thing about it is the equipment. So the equipment, they just started making pads and stuff. They've been making heads and sticks for a little while, and they have bags. So the cool thing about the bags is that the bags are designed to be good within Japan. So and the reason why that's different is because people don't drive everywhere. They actually hop into trains. And so the bags are easy to strap to your back or carry, and it holds the sticks tight to the body of the bag so that it doesn't like splay out. So it's way more portable, way less cumbersome. And so but you put less stuff in it just because you're traveling with it on your back. You don't need to bring 3 helmets, but one helmet, your pair of gloves, your shoulder pads, your elbows, cleats, a stick or two, and like they can go anywhere with that. And so I actually have one of their bags as well, and I love that. And then there's the equipment. I think that they're developing it constantly. A lot of it is like, from what I've seen, new products will be smaller batch just because it's a smaller company. They're only serving the population in Japan, which is still relatively large, but not everybody in Japan uses that equipment either. So this is just a shout out to definitely get more stuff in the United States, in Canada, and like hopefully maybe on like the Haudenosaunee nations. Like, if they're interested, I'd be happy to like help anyone get connected with them and like help out teams, because I think that you'd really like it. But
I'd
also,
love to get connected. I coach teams in Birmingham, and I run like a local collegiate league.
Oh yeah,
and like it's cool. I don't know.
yeah,
Like, I love the logo and the uniforms. I think the uniforms are sweet too.
yeah, they're awesome. I was really happy with them as well.
Yeah, and most people don't love the penny style with the shirt. I don't hate it, but like they look seamless. They don't like
Yeah,
it's hard to tell, I guess.
I mean, I was super thankful for it when we played in Birmingham because it was so hot that 2 weeks. So like
Exactly.
having the sleeveless, so like the air was just flowing out of the arms. I was very happy with it. So usually I was like, oh, that's interesting, no sleeves or whatever. And then I was playing in Birmingham. I was like, this is exactly what we needed, or else I don't know if I would survive. So.
That's cool. Well, do you have anything else related that you'd like to talk about before we go about Japan lacrosse?
No, I mean, we've covered most of it. I think that I just want to emphasize again, there's a lot of great players coming out of Japan. And I think that the next frontier for growing this game, when people talk about growing the game, I think that the real frontier is going to be bringing in more diversity into the North American lacrosse, as well as growing internationally. And I think that those are like the next frontiers of actually growing the game and not just capturing a fan base that is the fan base that we've already captured. So yeah, I just keep looking out for Japan growing, and also if you go over there, bring your stick, and yeah, let me know so I can hook you up with some teams that you can practice with. But yeah, it'll be very exciting. There's a lot of great
Also,
players coming out of there. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm a little washed up, so I don't know if I'd be able to make any saves, but I
Yeah.
could try my best.
Yeah. All
Awesome.
right.
Well, Kinori, I really enjoyed learning about Japan lacrosse. I think a lot of other people will. I'll definitely get connected with you on Visalo because that
Yeah.
sounds super, super cool. And I think people in Birmingham would really be interested because you were there. The whole entire crowd at UAB where the game was. Did y'all play Australia in the bronze game, or
No,
was
we
it
played England.
England? But
Yeah.
everybody was behind
Let's
y'all.
play them.
I got the video. I think I may have sent it to you, the game winning goal. But
Yeah.
everybody was cheering for Japan. So I know a lot of my players were there, and it was really exciting.
Yeah, Birmingham showed out. I remember being absolutely astonished that there were this many people there. You guys were awesome. That was one of the best crowds I've ever played in my life.
It's
So
growing. It's
yeah,
growing.
yeah,
All right. Really, really thankful for having you on today. And thanks for stopping by.
yeah. Thank you. Have a good one, man.
Awesome. Bye.